is on. You can tell I don't do this a lot because I don't know how to turn the microphone on. Good morning. My name is Carol Duncan. I am the chairman of the Dorchester County Republican Party, and I thank each and every one of you all for coming out on this absolutely gorgeous morning. We certainly want to thank all of you for coming to join Congressman Tim Scott as he holds his fifth in a town hall series of presidential candidates, and with him today we are honored to have former Senator Rick Santorum and his lovely wife Sharon. That Tim has an engagement right after this, so he has to leave promptly at 12:30. He won't be able to stay around and talk to us as he normally does, but he'll be back to Dorchester County. We know that. Thank you, Tim. Okay. So now I'd like to thank the co-sponsors, and since there is such an impressive list of sponsors, I'm going to have to read them. It's Berkeley County GOP, and Tim Callanan is on his way, the chairman. Beaufort County GOP, Carolina Forest GOP, Carolina Patriots, Charleston County GOP. Lynn Bennett is here with us today. And she's also our first vice chairman of the state Republican Party. Today, Lynn. And we have the Charleston Tea Party, the Dorchester County GOP, the Georgetown County GOP, Georgetown Patriots, Goose Creek 912, Horry County, Goose Creek, thank you. Horry County GOP, Horry County Young Republicans, Mount Pleasant 912, Myrtle Beach Tea Party, North Myrtle Beach GOP, Northern Horry County GOP, South Strand GOP, and the Somerville 912. We have quite a few people here, and Chairman John Paul is with us, and the Rocky Mountain Neck GOP. Now, do you think we like Tim Scott or what? Whole crowd of folks here. I would like to introduce Joan Brown, who is an executive committeeman of the Dorchester County GOP, where is Joan, and also a 912 officer. She will lead us in our opening prayer. Joan.
Please stand. Our Father, who art in heaven, we stand before Thee, O Lord, in this beautiful setting, a setting that reminds us of all that Thou hast created, from the tiny, most fragile blossom to the majesty of mighty mountains. Our great nature is in grave danger, Lord. It is threatened by evil in the world. It is threatened by corruption within, at the highest levels and at the lowest. Touch our hearts, O Lord, we pray, that each of us will strive to become more like Thee, that each of us will strive to seek Your will, not our own, O God. Father, we are grateful for freedom of speech and freedom of assembly as provided by our God-inspired Constitution. We are grateful for Mr. Santorum, who has traveled to join us here, seeking the highest office of our great land. Please, God, guide his thoughts and his words. But most of all, God, help us who listen. Help us to tap into that great power of discernment which Thou hast given us. Help us to listen, to truly listen, not so much to the words of man, but to the heart of man. We ask this not only for He who speaks to us today, but also as we listen to all the candidates at the debate in Spartanburg tonight. Please, God, guide us to the right candidate, Lord, the right candidate at the right time in history to do the right job in the right way to help us keep America free. Amen.
Thank you, Joan. Now, proudly join our future youth, our future of America, the youth, the conservative youth. We have Miss Caroline Reagan, who is the 9-year-old daughter of Jim and Seidel Herney. Caroline Reagan? Yay! Thank you so much.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all.
have coffee cups with Senator Santorum. He was our guest here in, what was it, Rick? It was May of 2010. Yeah, so he's been with us for quite a while here in Dorchester County, quite a friend of ours. So have one of these coffee cups, take them home with you. They are yours to keep. So without further ado, I would like to give a huge welcome, all of us give a huge welcome to Congressman Tim Scott and Rick Santorum, Presidential Candidate
I tell you what a beautiful Saturday morning this is. And to have the great Senator Santorum with us. How about that? Now, when you think about faith, family, and freedom, you automatically think about Rick Santorum. And I will tell you this. Before I knew him as a presidential candidate, I knew Rick Santorum. And this is a man who believes what he's talking about. He understands the issues, and when he says faith, he's talking about his faith. When he talks about family, he's talking about 7 kids and a beautiful wife. Just like his daughter, but a beautiful wife. And he understands freedom from a foreign perspective and a domestic perspective. So, without further ado, perhaps the next President of these United States, Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you very much. It is great to be here with all the non-football fans in Somerville. So, and for those of you who are not obviously who are Gamecock and Clemson fans who are here, I just want to thank you for the sacrifice you're making to joining us here today. It's really an honor for me to be here back in Dorchester County with Carol Ann and with all my friends here from the Low Country, and particularly honored that Tim Scott would invite me to be here and give me the opportunity to share the stage with him, who, I don't have to say this, I mean, all the national magazines, all the national conservative publications are saying it, truly a bright and rising star in the conservative world, and not just in Washington, D.C., but across this country. Thank you, Low Country, for giving us Tim Scott. I'm excited to be here with my wife, Karen, and Tim and Carol Ann both introduced Karen, but I want to do so too, because, well, if you're the mother of 7 kids, you deserve at least 3 introductions. And our children are ages 20 to 3, and we love the Low Country. Since Karen and I were married, we've been vacationing down in the Low Country. This is where we come for vacation. When we leave the state of Pennsylvania, we came to the Low Country, Charleston area, and our Karen's parents, who had 12 children, bought a home years and years ago down in Kiowa, and we have to share it with 10 other children, and so we used to get a week during the summer. They spend the winters and then come back home for the summer. So we would get a chance to come down, and we spent really some of our best memories as a family have been here in the Low Country. So this is really a home away from home for us, and so we were excited to come back here. And Karen doesn't do a lot of traveling, as you can imagine, with children ages 20 to 3. Doesn't do a lot of traveling, and we homeschool our kids. So I should say, she homeschools our kids. That was a royal we when I said we homeschool our children. Karen carries the load and does a great job and doesn't travel much, but when we had the opportunity to come down here to the Low Country, that's an invitation she can never pass up, and so. It's great to be here with all of you. Thank you for coming out again today. I know this is a town hall meeting, so I'm not going to give very long remarks, but just let me run very quickly through why I believe that I deserve your vote versus everybody else is in the field. And I agree with what everyone has said. Look, whoever wins that nomination, I'm going to vote for whoever's on this stage, and I'm going to go out and work hard for him, because the number one objective is to defeat Barack Obama in next November. But you have a special privilege, and I would argue a special responsibility. You have argued and fought, and your chairman, Chad Connolly, has fought diligently to put yourself in position to lead the country in making a decision who should be the next presidential nominee of our party. And so while it's always good to talk about everybody and say we need to focus on Barack Obama, the question is, why am I the best person to get your vote? And I would make the argument that I'm the best person because we have the best plan for America, and I have the background that you can check to see whether what I say I'm going to do is what I'll actually do. Because one of the things that's real important is the issue of authenticity and trust. We need a candidate who isn't going to go down there and go in front of whatever audience you are and say what that audience wants to hear. And then once you get through the primary, well, then have a different message. And then once you get elected, have a little different message. This is what drives a lot of conservatives crazy, because you don't know who you're electing. And one of the things that I like to say is that when what you see is what you get. There's a gentleman over here served with us, served as a veteran in the Korean War. And how many veterans do we have out here today? Please raise your hand. Let's thank all these veterans. Yesterday is Veterans Day. And we just thank you and bless you for your service to our country. This gentleman came up and said, I was in the state of Pennsylvania when you were a United States Senator, and you did what you said you were going to do. We could trust you. I represented a very tough state. Pennsylvania is a state that has over a million more registered Democrats and Republicans. It is not an easy state for a conservative to get elected. I was the first conservative elected in Pennsylvania, really since prior to the Great Depression. And Pennsylvania was a Republican state for many, many years, but it was not a conservative state. It was a typical, what we used to call Rockefeller Republican state, liberal Republican state. I changed all that. And when I went there, my voting record was as conservative as, well, if I represented South Carolina, for example, as Jim DeMint and some of the great conservatives that we have down here, Lindsey Graham on national security. So I went out there and took the fight on the conservative cause across the board. And that's what's important to understand. That it was not, I understand economics is the number one issue. It is the number one issue. And we need to have a president who goes out there and argues and articulates a vision that is counter to the socialistic policies of Barack Obama, the government elites who want to tell us how to run our lives, want to tell our businesses, like Boeing, where they can locate their plants. I mean, this is antithetical to everything that our founders fought and died for, which was to have limited government, have free people and free markets, not oppressive government telling businesses and telling people where they can build their plants, what health care they have to buy, what loans they can get, or what cars are going to be available and not available, what light bulbs and toilets you have. This is a nanny-state government. My grandfather and father came to this country because they wanted to leave a country that we're becoming. Because we have government who tells us everything that's best for us. Because they don't trust you. Well, I put forward a plan, an economic plan, that is bold, that cuts rates, that gets this economy humming again, that simplifies the tax code. We go to 5 deductions in the tax code. Charities, children, housing, pensions, and health care. That's it. Everything else is gone. It's a simple tax. And then we do one other thing. It's important to South Carolina. And that is, we focus on the manufacturing sector of the economy. Why? Because that's the sector of the economy that has struggled the most. I hear it everywhere I go, where Americans are sick and tired of going shopping and seeing made anywhere but America. What they want is to be able to see the jobs that created the broad middle income sector of America. They want to see those jobs come back. And people think, well, we can't get them back. Oh, those days are gone. You hear it here in South Carolina. Well, the textile, all these are gone. Well, you're proving, number one, you can compete. Obviously, Boeing's here. You can compete, but it's hard. It's hard to compete when government ties one hand behind businesses' backs and say, go out there and compete. If you look at our 9 trading partners, and you look at our competitive advantage or disadvantage versus those 9 trading partners, we have a 20% cost disadvantage with China, Mexico, all of our major trading partners. 20% cost disadvantage, excluding labor. That's not even counting labor costs. So, and that is all government. It is litigation, it is regulation, it is taxation, it is availability of capital, it is energy costs. All of those things are hurting our competitiveness. It's not that China can beat us because they're smarter, better, or whatever. No, we beat ourselves. We make it impossible for businesses, almost impossible for them to compete. We have to be so much better here in America to keep jobs here in America than everybody else, because what the government does, well, we put a plan together that levels that playing field, in fact, tilts it in our direction. And that is, we zero out the tax on manufacturers. No corporate taxes for manufacturers if you make things here in America. That's a 35% tax rate now gone. We say to the regulatory agencies, we're going to repeal every regulation that costs manufacturers and businesses over $100 million a year. And if we have to replace them at all, we'll replace them with ones that businesses can work with so we can be competitive. Third, we're going to take energy prices. And we're going to lower energy prices by opening up this country for energy. It's going to, you want to talk about trading the balance, getting rid of our trade balance. Lower energy prices. Create energy independence in this country. We can do it. Look at natural gas. 7 years ago, the price of natural gas in this country was $12, and we were importing natural gas, setting up LNG terminals all on the East Coast to get natural gas from the Middle East, just like we were getting oil from the Middle East. Now, we're exporting natural gas. Why? Because we opened up drilling in Pennsylvania primarily, and we're drilling 3,000 wells a year in Pennsylvania. Rural areas are getting wealthier. Jobs are being created outside of the cities. And the price of natural gas is not $12 anymore. It's $3.60. That's the difference. We do that with oil. We will build a manufacturing base. We will create. Look at what the president did with the Keystone Pipeline. A pure political decision to shut that, to delay the decision on a pipeline that would take oil from Canada and North Dakota and bring it down all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico for refining. Jobs on the pipeline, jobs for refining, jobs for drilling. And the president says, no, we're going to delay it until after the election because he doesn't want to upset the environmentalists. This president makes every decision based on his own personal interest, not on your interest. He needs to go and go now. I'm just starting, but I'll stop. And I'll sit back here, and I know you guys want to answer questions, and I'll get the rest of this fire going when we take your questions. Tim, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and look forward to your questions.
Well, fantastic start. As you guys may or may not know, the way this town hall works is you guys ask the questions. I read them. I recognize you in the audience. I ask you to stand up, and then we hand the mic back over to Senator Santorum. Gary Wallace, are you here? Gary, thank you for the question. The question is, I'm going to start at the end. Okay. Missed the first paragraph. Okay. Basically, with respect to our national debt, what immediate changes would you make your first month? And the question is about creating momentum for your entire term. So he wants to know what you do the first month to get it started.
Thank you. First thing I would do is we would repeal Obamacare, which would be a huge thing that we could do. When I'm elected, my plan will be not just to get elected, but to get elected with a Senate that is not only in the majority, but has a strong majority. And the bigger majority we can get, there have been 3 times in the history of this country where there have been major changes in government. I mean, big change. 3 times in the last 100 years. And those 3 times occurred at the New Deal, the Great Society, in the last 2 years under President Obama. Big fundamental shifts in the size and scale of government and its relationship to the people. What do those three things have in common? Anybody know?
Senate.
Senate.
And the president, all Democrats.
Not just that, but that's, you're right, but one little caveat. Senate, House, House President, Liberal Democrat. Third thing, very important, a super majority in the United States Senate. A filibuster-proof majority in the United States Senate. Those 3 times are the 3 times the Democrats had all those things. Now, how many times during the last 100 years did Republicans have a Republican president, Republican House, and a supermajority in the Senate? She's correct, never. And so when people say, why does the government keep getting bigger and we can't shrink it? Because you folks haven't elected, you being the American public, hasn't elected a majority enough to make that difference. Well, you did a great job, and I know there's a lot of 9/12 Tea Party folks out here. You did a great job in 2010 in getting us close. You certainly gave us a big majority in the House, but we fell short in the Senate. We did not do as well in the Senate as we did in the House. Why? Because the left knows that's what really matters. You're going to see the left come out and put all their energy. They're going to forget about the House. They know they can't win the House. They're going to put their energy in the United States Senate to hold the line. So winning the Senate is huge. If we can win the Senate, I guarantee you, and get to 60, which you say, how can you do it? You're at 47. Well, we've got 23 Democratic Senate seats up this time. So we can definitely pick up a bunch and get close. And if we get close, that might be enough to intimidate a handful of conservative Democrats that are left to give us the 60 votes. If we can repeal Obamacare the first day we're there, literally the first day, because the House and Senate come in before the president's sworn in. They can pass it both, and by the time I get sworn in, I can just go down to the White House, and before I can take that walk down the parade route and sign that bill. So, you want to talk about building momentum. That would be a huge way of building momentum to say that government's going to get out of our lives. There's several things we can do right away. We can put a pay freeze, for example, on. That's something that has to be done. We can put a hiring freeze on right away in the federal government. There are things a president can do immediately through executive order to save money for the federal government. We can put freezes on all sorts of spending that is out there. And one of the things that we will do is, in fact, freeze federal spending, stop spending in areas that are simply not our responsibility to do, and then fight the battle as to whether to repeal that in the coming appropriation cycle. That's number one. Number two, we need to, as far as right away, I will go out across this country and start making the argument for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. One of the things I learned, you know, people say experience in Washington is a bad thing. We don't want somebody who's been down there. We're talking about President of the United States, folks. We're talking about a position where a little experience might go a long way. We tried no experience the last time around. How's that working out for America right now? Having someone who understands what's possible and what needs to be done because they've experienced it. Tim will tell you, I mean, once you serve there, you see all the ugliness that occurs. And I'm not talking on the Democratic side, I'm talking on our side, on how people just sell out and compromise unnecessarily. I know how that system works. We are never going to balance the budget. Let me just repeat this. We will never balance the budget unless we're going to change the rules. Unless we change the rules of how Washington works, we will never get that budget in balance given the demographic situation we're in right now. So having a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution is the greatest gift that any of us can give to the future generations of Americans, because it will guarantee freedom. Because when you pass the balanced budget amendment that I know Tim supports, it not just requires a balanced budget, but it caps the level of federal spending at 18 or 19% of GDP. Once you do that, you guarantee the next generation that they will be free, because by definition, government will be limited to a very relatively small percentage of the overall budget of this country.
Elaine, you just answered your question on the balanced budget amendment. We'll move on to the next question. Michael Johnson. Hey, Michael, thank you for coming out.
I had the same kind of question that I bring to the
Thank you, Michael. Two questions. One question is, which tax loopholes would you want to close as president? Second question has to do with bringing all the troops home from all around the world, excluding South Korea.
Okay. Tax loopholes, as I mentioned in my speech, I'd get rid of all of them, except 5 deductions. Everything else would go. Corporate taxes, pretty much the same thing. Get rid of all of the, what are called tax expenditures. I mean, there's certain things that would still be deductible. For example, you know, wages and capital equipment and things like that, which would be basic things that would not be an income tax. It would be a gross receipts tax, which we don't want. We don't want to do that to businesses. So there would still be some level of deductions on the corporate side, as there would be on the personal side. I talked about 5, but all of the other bells and whistles, and this goes for energy too. Very important. Newt Gingrich and I share a lot of opinions together, but Newt's opinion on energy is to fully fund all of the incentives to create energy. My feeling is, let's do the opposite and save money and get the same result, which is get rid of all of them. If you get rid of all of them, then you've accomplished almost the same thing of having all of them. Having all of them creates, you know, a government participation, but it creates sort of the same marketplace, if you provide sort of equal incentives for everything, as getting rid of all of them. And you just, in this way, you just save the government money and you create the marketplace as a marketplace. And so whether it's wind or solar or ethanol or oil or gas, get rid of all of them. That would be getting rid of the loopholes you talked about. As far as taking the troops home, it's a complex matter. Number one, our 2 biggest concentrations of troops, 3 biggest concentrations, are South Korea, Japan, and Germany. Now, South Korea, as you alluded to, is a place where you have troops, in large part, as a deterrent effect for the North Koreans and trying to keep stability on that peninsula. We have a Korean War vet here who knows that peninsula can blow up very, very quickly, and the United States can be dragged back into something that no one wants to see happen again. And so having that stability there is important. As far as the number of troops, it's 35,000, I think. Whether we need 35 or 25, I'll certainly look at that in more detail than I am now and determine whether we're at the right number. But I think we do need a troop presence there. Japan and Germany. Why do we have troops in Japan and Germany? What was the deal after World War II?
Rebuilding.
Right, but what else? What was the other deal?
They don't get their own army.
That's right. We made a decision that the world's a better place with a demilitarized Japan and Germany. Anybody still don't think that's a good idea? I think that's a good idea still. That I think if you want to look at history, I don't think we want to militarize Japan and Germany. Now, if we don't have a militarized Japan and Germany, then someone's got to be there to give those governments the security that there is some level of protection for their people. Now you can say, well, why is it our burden? Okay, let's say it's not our burden. Who else is going to do it? China? I don't think that's going to work out so well with the Japanese. So if we don't do it, it isn't going to get done. And if it doesn't get done, then we have a remilitarized Japan and Germany. Not sure that's a good idea. So, and that's number one. Number two, having bases there, and forward bases, large substantial bases, allows us the flexibility to be able to project force. And projecting force is very important, particularly in the world today, where hotspots can pop up all over the world, and having that capability to be able to respond, not just on a blue water navy. And you know, blue water navy is important, and we need to increase our presence in blue water. But we need to have sizable bases in the Pacific and in the Atlantic and in Europe for us to be able to respond to the contingencies that are going to come about. And particularly now, with what we're seeing in China getting much more territorial, we're now opening up bases. The President's talking about opening up bases in Australia. Why? Because the Australians are nervous about what the Chinese are doing in their waters. And we sort of take for granted the fact that we have international shipping and things work very smoothly. I mean, we sort of got surprised, oh, there's these Somali pirates. Pirating was something that was a given for millennia, right? I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, it doesn't exist, and it's not an accident, it's us. We keep the shipping lanes open. Our blue water navy is the economic security for the stability of the world. And so having that deployment there is also important. We have to have bases on which our Navy's going to be able to dock. So we've closed a lot of foreign bases. People don't know that, but we have. We've closed a lot. But the ones that we have in place, I believe, I'm not against looking at them and potentially scaling down some of them. But we need to maintain the stability for those two countries and the forward-facing opportunity for us as we deal with the contingencies that we're going to have to in the world.
Thank you. Karen Ragsdale. Thanks for your question, Karen. How would you balance the move towards globalization versus national sovereignty?
I'm a national sovereignty guy, not a globalization guy. I don't have a problem with participating in international organizations, but I don't think we should participate in international organizations just because they exist if they aren't serving the purpose of the organization or of our interests in the world. And I think our interests, contrary to what Barack Obama and the left believes, I think our interests have never been just the interests of the United States. The United States understands that a freer, safer, and more prosperous world is better for our country, and we exporting those values and promoting those values around the world is a good thing for free people, for people all over the world. It's a good thing for us. More countries are like us, the safer we are. And so while we're not completely altruistic in how we deal in international affairs, we are certainly the most altruistic country that has ever dealt in world affairs in the history of the world. And so I don't apologize for that. I'm proud of that. America has a lot to be proud of in how we have freed and liberated people, and we have not been imperialistic in taking countries and for purposes of our own wealth or sovereignty. Having said that, specifically, we can look at organizations within the United Nations that are not serving the purpose that those organizations, or at least were created to do, and in some cases are undermining our national security, our interests, and are undermining the interest of freedom and security around the world. If that is the case, like, for example, UNESCO, which just embraced the Palestinian Authority and made them a member country, the immediate reaction of the Santorum administration was, we are defunding UNESCO, we are not participating in that. And we need to, case by case, as these organizations attempt to promote their agenda, which is antithetical to the agenda of what I talked about, what America's interest and the interest of freedom-loving people around the world, we need to disassociate ourselves, defund it, and delegitimize these organizations as international bodies.
David Hardy. Thank you, David. Iran is getting closer to having a nuclear weapon. There's no doubt that Israel says it will use military action. The question is, should the United States have allowed Iran to get this close to having a nuclear weapon? And should we take military action, or should we have already taken military action?
Thank you, Tim. I actually gave a long speech about this yesterday. Where was I yesterday? I'm trying to remember where we gave it.
Florence.
I was in Florence yesterday. When you're on the road, sometimes it's just, one day after another. So I was in Florence yesterday. That's right, I was in the right in the middle of town, the auditorium there. And I gave a speech yesterday. I also gave a similar speech up in New Boston, New Hampshire, on the subject. And those will be available on my website if you want to hear the whole answer, because it's about a half-hour speech, and I don't want to give a half-hour speech on this. But I have been ringing and sounding the alarm on Iran for almost a decade. And the most recent, I introduced a bill way back in 2004, in the middle of the Iraq War, and said that we needed to shut down Iran's nuclear program. This was at a time when our intelligence was saying it didn't exist, that it had been shut down, that they had shut it down as a result of our actions in Iraq. And I knew better because I was getting intelligence from folks other than the U.S. intelligence sources. And I said we needed to engage the pro-democracy movement in Iran. Iranians love the United States. Their government hates us. But Iranians love us. Why? Because we call their government what they are, corrupt and evil. And they know they're corrupt and evil, so they like us. And we should have, and back then I said, we should be engaging them. We should be funding them, funneling all sorts of money to them. For example, there are routinely strikes in Iran. Different labor unions, they have labor unions, they have strikes. But they end up not succeeding because they don't have sufficient strike funds to keep people out of work for a long period of time. Well, providing money to these organizations through labor unions, believe it or not, was one of the reasons. Look at Poland and what happened there. You know, use the levers of power that we have, money, to be able to destabilize this government. Well, I put together a bill that did that, as well as put sanctions on the government to stop them from getting their nuclear program. When I introduced it, I had 0 co-sponsors. No one was going to do it. Everyone says, "Oh my gosh, we're in the middle of a war. What are you talking about Iran for? Shut up." You know, we got a big, you're a warmonger. Even today, I gave this speech and all the press reports. Santorum wants to go to war again. No. Santorum wants to avert a war. Santorum wants to avert a cataclysmic, world-changing event, which is Iran getting a nuclear weapon. And I argued for this bill. I had no co-sponsors in 2004. I went out and continued to talk about this issue, talk about what Iran was all about, talk about their theocracy, talk about their capability, talk about what they were doing in Iraq and Afghanistan, in building IEDs that have been used to kill more troops in Iraq and Afghanistan than any other weapon. And they're made in Iran. These people are trained in Iran. They're supported with finances and transportation in Iran. Iran has done more to kill troops than the Iraqis have, and the Afghans have, than the Taliban has. And yet for 2 administrations we have been silent. In fact, President Bush wanted to negotiate with them. We forget that. Everyone says, "Oh, well, President Obama wanted to negotiate without preconditions." President Bush negotiated with the Iranians. I objected to it at the time. I said, "You're crazy. You can't negotiate with theocrats. Read what they believe. They believe we are evil, not by what we do, but who we are. And they want to destroy us. They want to destroy us. They want to lead the Islamic world and destroy us. We have to stop them before they get the capability to do it." Within 18 months, I went from 0 co-sponsors to 60. And I tried to, and when the president announced he was going to negotiate with Iran, I said, "Okay, I've had it. I'm going to bring this bill forward to the Congress, to the Senate, and see if we can pass it." Ultimately, President Bush opposed me, and we lost by 3 votes. The negotiations continued for a few more months. They collapsed, and 5 months after I lost the vote, the bill passed the United States Senate, was signed by President Bush. Now the problem is, we put money on the table, and Bush spent it in the United States, not in Iran. And when Obama came into office, he cut the money. And so when the Iranian Revolution occurred in the summer of 2009, we had nothing on the table. And worse than that, President Obama turned his back on those demonstrators. The demonstrators who were trying to overthrow the existential threat to the state of Israel, Iran. A country that has been at war with us since 1979, who's killed more of our troops than anybody else. President Obama sided with nobody. And ultimately tried to quell the riots in the streets, saying, you need to proceed in an orderly fashion, or things like this. And as a result, they were crushed. Interestingly enough, after Iran, when the Arab Spring came around and demonstrators were rebelling against friends of the United States, we sided with the rebels. I asked this is a legitimate question for Americans to ask, whose side is the president on? Are they on the side of America and friends of America, or are you on the side of the enemies of America? And if so, why? If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, the event that happened that was thwarted just a few weeks ago, which is the attack on a Saudi ambassador here in the United States, will be a weekly occurrence. America and our security will be... There are stealth jihadists all over America. There are people waiting for the moment to be activated. Are there millions? No, but there don't need to be millions. As we saw from the events of September 11th, there don't need to be millions. We have an open southern border. We have jihadists and Hezbollah training camps all throughout Central and South America. And with an open southern border, they don't even have to be here in America, even though there are some here. Once Iran is free from being attacked, and they will be once they have a nuclear weapon. No nuclear power has ever been attacked. Once they are free from being attacked, your life and our future will be different. That's why I've said publicly, we must work with our ally Israel, who desperately wants to stop this from happening. And we must, as Israel did in Syria, as Israel did in Iraq, take out this nuclear capability. Degrade it to the point where it is not viable, and let them know that if they try to rebuild it, we'll do it again. If we don't do that, we will have created a new world in which America, for the first time, well, since we became a world power, will be vulnerable, incredibly vulnerable, to attacks. If you want to see an economic issue, how about serial terrorist attacks in this country and what this will do to the economy of America? What it will do to your freedom once this begins to happen. The police state that might come. You're worried about the Patriot Act. We'll laugh if the Patriot Act is impinging upon our freedom. Because people will be so afraid. Either act now, or we will pay dearly later.
Vicky Moore? Vicky? I think you kind of covered the whole question on Israel. Is that good for you? All right, good. 7. That's a question on, after the repeal of Obamacare, what reforms would you put in place to make sure that we never have an Obamacare healthcare system?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Again, it's one of the things you got to look back and see, well, has this candidate who we're putting forward, can he paint an alternative vision to Obamacare with credibility and go out and convince the American public that the plan he has is a viable one for the future of our country? Because people do care about health care. Back in 1994, I ran a race for the United States Senate against an incumbent Democrat. It's very interesting. We're going to Wofford College tonight because this guy's name was Harris Wofford. And his family was one of the ones who started Wofford College, interestingly enough. And he was the United States Senator from Pennsylvania, and he was the author of Clinton Care in the U.S. Senate. He had run a campaign in 1991 in a special election. That election was, the campaign manager in that campaign was James Carville and Paul McGowan. And they ran a race saying if you have a right to a lawyer, you should have a right to a doctor, and they defeated the former two-term governor of Pennsylvania, Richard Thornburg, who at the time was the Attorney General of the country under George Bush. He went on to author Clinton Care, and the race in 1994 in Pennsylvania, a blue state, a state with 1 million more Democrats and Republicans, was whether we should have national health care or whether we should have the alternative to national health care, and I was that candidate offering the alternative. And the alternative was, we need a healthcare system that is consumer-driven, where we have a doctor-patient relationship where the consumer, the patient, is in charge, and that we have the freedom to be able to go out and purchase the health care that we believe is best for us, without doctors interfering, without insurance company micromanaging. And I proposed something back then, way back in 1992, which I advocate today. It's in place in some limited degree, called health savings accounts, right? I was the first member of Congress to introduce that concept, way back in 1992, with a guy that has been in the press lately by the name of John Kasich, now the governor of Ohio. The two of us introduced that bill together. And I used that as the platform, talking about how we are not going to control healthcare costs. And the biggest problem in healthcare is we're spending almost 18% of GDP on healthcare. The next highest is 12th in any country. And why? Because we have enormous inefficiencies, because the consumer of healthcare is detached from the purchase of healthcare. And so if you're buying something and you're not paying for it, guess what's going to happen? You're going to use a lot more of it, and you're going to waste a lot. It's just I always use the example of food. Imagine if we had food insurance. Food's a necessity, just like healthcare, right? Why don't we have food insurance, where everybody, goes to the to Piggly Wiggly and gives $500 to Piggly Wiggly at the beginning of the month, and then you go to Piggly Wiggly and buy all the food you want. And you only have to pay a copay. You You don't have to pay for it. Why should people have to decide between food and gasoline? Everybody should have free food. That's what the argument is. Why should people have to decide between medicines and healthcare and buying gas? You should have free healthcare. Well, why not free food? And why not free gasoline? Why not? Why should you have to make any decision? Government will provide all this for you. This is what the left is. I always hesitate to use this example of free food because if Obama hears it, he may take up that idea. So please don't replay this for Obama. But imagine, going to the Piggly Wiggly, how many of you, if you bought your insurance, and now you can take whatever you want, and you only have to pay a small co-payment, how many people there would buy low-grade cuts of meat? Right? How many would buy generics? Store brands. There wouldn't be any store brands. It'd be premium and super premium brands. Right? And you would fill up your cart, you'd go there, and they'd run the scanner, they'd still scan it, you have to see how much it is. And they say, oh, it's $395, but you pay $42.10. How many are back at the store the next day? What do you think of the obesity problem in America? Right? Just saying. So, but think of the waste. Think of the fraud. How much are they going to charge for these products? Because you're not paying for them anyway, so let's just charge whatever. Because you're only paying a fraction of them. That's the problem. We have to put 300 million consumers in America in the healthcare area, just like we do in every other aspect of our lives. We all have auto insurance. But auto insurance doesn't pay to fill your car up. But it does pay for a doctor visit if you're in healthcare. Auto insurance doesn't pay for an oil change. You won't even turn it in if it's a little fender bender. Why? Because you don't want your insurance to go up. Well, under President Obama, you turn in all these insurance claims and it's community rated, so it doesn't matter how much you use, you get charged the same, whether you use it or don't. So guess what happens? We use more. That is the fundamental decision we have to make. Is changing the system to get the lawyers out, to get the insurance companies out, and to get you as consumers back involved. And insurance should only be for what auto and health and auto and homeowners should be, which is this catastrophic event, the chronic disease. And in that case, you work with the insurance company to manage those costs, which are higher costs. That's what insurance companies do best. They don't pay doctors' claims and other things. That is what they do worst, and it's costly, and it adds, and it wastes. We need to change it. Thank you.
All right, we're down to our last 10 minutes. So I'm trying to go through 3 questions in 5 minutes and give you an opportunity to have a 5-minute close. All right? Paige Merrill submitted her question by Facebook. Is she here? All right. Paige's question is, how would you propose to modernize our nation's infrastructure system, port, rail, highways?
I do believe the federal government has a role in this. And I know there's some conservatives in constitutions who say, well, why is the federal government involved in transportation at all? And to me, it's a legitimate interstate commerce issue. I come from Pennsylvania. I know this is the case here in South Carolina too, but I come from Pennsylvania. About 85% of the truck traffic that goes through Pennsylvania never stops in Pennsylvania. Because if you look at us, we're called the Keystone State for a reason. We sort of connect the rest of the country to New England and New York. And everything from that area of the country comes through Pennsylvania. And our roads just get hammered because of all that heavy truck traffic. And you can say, well, Pennsylvania should be on its own. We shouldn't have a national highway program. That's fine. Then, you're going to be in delays and you're not going to get, commerce isn't going to move. So there is a reason for a national highway system. There is a reason for a port system and for federal support for the Corps of Engineers. And I think it's a legitimate expenditure of government. It's not an area of the government that I would cut. It's an area of the government that we need to work on private-public partnerships more than we do. We need to engage the private sector in supporting infrastructure development, create incentives for them to do so. But it is core a function. I'm not talking, this is one of the problems of the way we do infrastructure. Because there's a lot of projects that get funded at the federal level but have nothing to do with interstate commerce. They're local projects in local communities. We have to start drawing the line, narrow what federal dollars can be used for, but keep those dollars in place, because infrastructure is a big problem. It is a big problem in this country, and the federal role of it, to me, is an important one, but it has to be for interstate activities and commerce, not for local road projects to rebuild a local bridge, because, no offense, because I know Tim doesn't earmark, but that the local congressman wants. And for far too long that's been going on. We need to stop that and focus on commerce, not local development. That's for local and states to do.
Thank you. Next question, Phil Rust. Phil, thank you for your question. Some believe that there are too many regulations. The question he has is, do you believe that regulations are needed to rein in corporate misconduct?
There may be too many regulations, but that doesn't mean we don't need regulation. I mean, there certainly was a lot of regulations that are in place that allowed for corporate misconduct. Look at this MF Global situation. It turns out to be a little regulation in the CFTC that, with all these regulations, say you can't use personal accounts and secured accounts and invest those in risky ventures and leverage those for the benefit of the company. There's all sorts of things that say that, and then there's an exclusion to that no one seemed to pay any attention to, that allowed them to go out and take secured deposits and trade on behalf of the company, and the profit all goes to the company. None to the people who have the secure deposits. So you have to look at the regulatory structure, number one, and make sure that we don't create these loopholes for bad things to happen, number one. But the most important thing is the way we write legislation. And I don't hear anybody, again, having a little experience is a good thing. My experience is that if you look at the way the left writes legislation, they write big, broad, sweeping legislation. NLRB is a good example. What's an unfair labor practice? Well, if you look at the definition, it's basically whatever the NLRB says it is. And as a result, you get a bunch of bad people on the NLRB and you get a Boeing situation. One of the things we need to do is amend, not just throw the folks off the NLRB and change the regulations. We need to change the law where the Congress has to go in and write more specific laws and stop giving broad authority to the administration to draft rules and regulations to do whatever they want to do. In the health care bill, I think there are there's thousands of pages of regulations that are going to be drafted. Why? Because in that bill, there's all these sections that say, we want to do this and the secretary shall, and this just leaves all this authority. Good and bad. I mean, they gave the authority to implement the Class Act, which is a long-term care thing, and the secretary said, you know what, ain't no way for us to do this. Now that turned out to be a good thing, but it's an example of the broad level of authority. Smaller bills, no multi-thousand page bills, smaller bills. Congress has to fight through the specifics. If Congress wants to pass a law on something, be specific as what you want to accomplish, give clear direction to the regulators, or I'm going to veto that bill.
Final question, then a 5-minute or so wrap up. Tim Squire. Tim, thanks for your question. This question is, are Republicans moving beyond Ronald Reagan or standing on his shoulders? What are our principles today?
Good question. I would say that Ronald Reagan stood on the founders' principles. I said this the other night, and maybe it's a good way for me to wrap up too, because I know, Tim, you got to go, and I don't want you to be stressed, breaking any laws, we have to flip the coin on the opening. That's what you're doing, right? Charleston Southern football game, so I don't want to make him late. So it's very interesting. I saw a Winston Churchill quote the other day that sort of got me thinking, where he was talking about the debate in the country is not about the future. It's about the past. Now you think about that and you sort of think, well, what do you mean by that? Well, if you believe that America's past is bad, that if you believe America is a corrupt institution, if you believe America is a bigoted, paternalistic, imperialistic, go on down the list of the left. Go just read what Occupy Wall Street is saying about America. That's how they view America in the past. And that's why they say, well, here's what America means to me. Ronald Reagan, when he left office, said his last words to America as president. Go read them. He talks about his concern about Americans understanding American history and who we are. We have the national media. We have Hollywood and the popular culture. And horribly, we have higher education and now lower education, primary and secondary education, inculcating a vision of America, that America is broken, that America at its founding was wrong. America, throughout the course, has been a source, a problem, has been discriminatory and bigoted and all of these other things that you hear the left talk about as to who we are. And that's why we need to, as a result, if you think that, then of course the path is pretty clear. Right? We've got to do something different. Hope and change. Big change. Why? Read Obama's speeches. Everybody focused on hope and change and hope and change. Read his speeches from the last election. It was a condemnation of America's past. Ronald Reagan didn't believe we were not perfect. But he believed in the founding principles of our country, that we are a country that is different than any other country in the history of the world, because we're a country that gets rights from a creator. We are based in the best principles of Western civilization, the biblical principles of Western civilization, that God, not any God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that God gave us rights. It's in the Declaration of Independence. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Right? Among them, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Think about what that means. We get rights from this all-powerful God who gives each of us the right to life from the moment of conception, I might add. I love the left who says, oh, the Republicans are anti-science. Oh, except when it comes to when life begins. Then they're anti-science. Because there's no question when life begins. No biologist who's worth anything will tell you that life begins anywhere other than at conception. It's true. It's unique DNA and it's a lie. They create a legal fiction, unscientifically, that somehow is not a person. Life, liberty, freedom. To do what? To pursue happiness. Very important thing. A pastor in Sioux City made this observation to me. Because he went back and looked up old dictionaries at the time of our founders. You know what he found? That happiness, the definition of happiness that was in use at the time, you know how definitions of words change over time. The definition of happiness in use over time is different than what you think is happiness. You see, our popular culture has taught us that happiness is do whatever makes you feel good. Pursue happiness is pleasure. It's feeling good. That's happiness. Our founders understood that was not happiness. Why? They were deeply based in Scripture. And of course, if you look at the definition, happiness meant to do the morally right thing. Why? Think about it. This is, again, biblically based. What makes us truly happy? What makes people truly happy is doing God's will in your life. Doing things that you are ordered in a natural way, ordered to do, not ordered, commanded, but ordered, naturally ordered to do under the Judeo-Christian ethic. That leads to true happiness. So here, think about America, think about that sentence that's the core of American exceptionalism, the core of who we are. I always say my message has always been to remind Americans who we are so we can build a future as to who we can be again. And if you think America is a country that is a moral enterprise based on rights given to us by God so we can use those rights to do what He has called us to do and therefore build a godly country from the bottom up with limited government. It can happen. It did happen. Oh, there were faults and problems. But people, mostly driven by faith, always agitating to change the injustice. Always agitating because we knew that if our laws, our civic laws, didn't comport with God's higher law, that those in faith would continually agitate, like the abortion movement, the pro-life movement, I should say, is doing today. That movement will never go away, because our laws are inconsistent with His laws, inconsistent with the natural law. The same thing with marriage. I'm not against gay people. Gay people can live whatever life they want to live. I am against trying to impose their values, their law, which is antithetical to God's law and to natural law. It's pretty simple to understand and see men and women complement each other. Nature sort of made that clear. And when we try to violate nature and try to do things that are antithetical to His will and to nature, we get into a lot of trouble. So if you want to look for a candidate who is willing to go out and talk boldly, draw stark contrasts, and has a record that actually backs up that when he gets to Washington, D.C., he'll do it, and happens to come from a state, and the only person in this race who comes from a state that is a swing key state, that if we won, the race would be over. If on election night at 10 o'clock it's predicted that Rick Santorum is the winner in Pennsylvania, you can go to bed knowing you will have a brand new president of the United States. So having someone who, by the way, has defeated Democratic incumbents, nobody else in this race has ever defeated a Democratic incumbent. 3 times I was matched up against Democratic incumbents, 3-0. You people in South Carolina, you asked for the burden and responsibility. Don't listen to what those folks in New York and Washington tell you to vote for. Don't let the folks at the debate table, the elite media, who ask all the questions of 1 or 2 candidates and occasionally throws a bone to those of us at the outside just to make sure that we aren't completely silent. Don't let them make the decision for you. You make the decision. Final point. I saw Tim get up. I need your help. All the other candidates will say, oh, we need your help. They're lying. I need your help. I need your help because we're running the kind of campaign that needs you. They've got all this money. They got all this national coverage. We need you, the people of South Carolina, to step up and help us, to work for us, to talk to your friends and neighbors, to talk to the people at church, to talk to the people at the grocery store, to get a bumper sticker and a yard sign, put it on your car. The bumper sticker, not the yard sign. Put it on your car and help us. You will create the biggest shock to the political establishment that has ever occurred in a primary process. If South Carolina comes in big for Rick Santorum and we win, I know with your help we can make that happen. Thank you, Justin.